Shin Jae-won was the kind of man who made entire rooms go quiet the second he walked in. Cold, precise, untouchable. He had built Hansung Medical Center from a struggling mid-sized facility into the most respected private hospital in Busan, and he had done it the same way he did everything else, by cutting out every single thing that didn't serve a purpose. Feelings included, warmth included, hope most of all included. 3 years ago, his wife Seo Yujin had died in the oncology ward on the 7th floor of the very building he now ran. He had held her hand as she went. He had straightened his tie the morning after the funeral and walked back into his office because there was nothing else left to do. The grief didn't break him. It hollowed him out, and he let it because a hollow man doesn't bleed. That was the life he had chosen. That was the life he intended to keep. And then one Tuesday night, a baby girl crawled into his private office and smiled at him like she already knew him. The board meeting that evening had been a disaster dressed up in expensive suits and diplomatic language. Their primary investor, a Shanghai-based medical group that had funded the hospital's new trauma wing, was withdrawing. 18 months of construction, and now the numbers on the table were bleeding red. His CFO had pulled him aside after the last board member filed out and said the words quietly, like softness would make them land easier. 30 days. If they didn't find new funding within 30 days, they'd have to start cutting staff. Cutting staff in a hospital. As if the people holding scalpels and administering medication and sitting with dying patients through the night were line items to be adjusted. Jae-won had sent everyone home after that. He sat alone at the long conference table for a few minutes, staring at the financial projections, then gathered himself and walked to the inner office, the private space at the back of his suite, accessible only to him. The place he went when the weight of the whole thing became too much to carry in front of other people. He heard the sound before he pushed the door open. Small, soft, almost like a bird. He stopped. The inner office had a biometric lock. He was the only person with access. He stood still and listened and heard it again, a quiet, satisfied little sound, followed by a faint rustling. He pushed the door open slowly. In the center of his private office floor, sitting with her thick little legs stretched out in front of her, was a baby girl. She couldn't have been more than a year old. She was wearing a yellow onesie printed with tiny sunflowers and white socks that had ruffles at the ankle. Her hair was a cloud of dark coils pulled into 2 small puffs on top of her head. She was deeply, intensely focused on the fringe of his area rug, pulling at the threads one by one with the concentration of a scientist running an experiment. Jae-won stood in the doorway for a full 10 seconds and did not move. The baby looked up, as though she felt his eyes on her. She studied him for a moment with huge dark eyes. Then she smiled, wide, toothless, completely without fear, and held up a small fistful of rug thread like a trophy. Something moved in his chest. He didn't have a name for it. He hadn't felt it in so long he almost didn't recognize it. He crossed the room slowly and crouched down in front of her. "You just destroyed a very expensive rug," he said quietly. The baby laughed. The sound cracked something open inside him, bright and sudden and impossible to close back up. "Who are you?" he asked. How did you get in here?" She blinked at him, then leaned forward and placed the wad of rug threads carefully in his open palm, like it was the most generous gift she could offer. "Thank you," he said, because it seemed like the right response. She clapped, delighted with herself. He should have called security. Should have picked up his phone and had someone come collect her within 60 seconds. Instead, he sat down on the floor in his 300,001 suit and watched her. She crawled toward him without hesitation, pulled herself up using his knee, and looked at him with frank expectation. "You want to be picked up?" he said. She nodded. Clearly. Deliberately. He lifted her, and she settled against his chest with a small sigh, her tiny fingers curling into the fabric of his dress shirt. The weight of her was staggering, not physical, something else entirely. Something he had been careful to never feel again. The door burst open. "Oh God, Naya." He looked up. The woman standing in the doorway was breathing like she'd run the entire length of the hospital. She was black, her skin a deep warm brown, her natural hair twisted up into a bun that was falling loose at the sides from what was clearly a very recent sprint. She was wearing pediatric scrubs, pale blue, printed with cartoon elephants and giraffes, and her name badge was crooked on her chest. She was also the most beautiful woman he had seen in 3 years. Not because of anything arranged or deliberate. Because of the raw, terrified relief flooding her face the moment her eyes found the baby in his arms. "I am so sorry," she said, stepping forward, her voice half breathless, half horrified. "I put her in the staff break room while I checked on a patient, 5 minutes, that's all it was, and when I came back the door was open and she was just… I don't know how she got all the way up here, I don't know how she got through the…" She stopped, seemed to register exactly who she was talking to, and went very still. "Chairman Shin," she said, her voice dropping to something more careful. "I'm so sorry. I'll take her right now." The baby, Naya, apparently, heard her mother's voice and turned her head. Then she looked at Jae-won, then back at her mother. Then she made a very firm decision and pressed her face directly into Jae-won's collar. The woman reached for her. "Naya, baby, come to mommy." Naya whimpered and tightened her grip on his shirt. A long, slightly stunned silence passed between the two adults. Jae-won looked at the nurse's name badge. Linda Osei, pediatrics. He looked at her hands, still outstretched for her daughter. They were shaking barely, but he noticed. He looked at her face again. The dark circles under her eyes. The crease across her cheek from what must have been a pillow grabbed during a break that was too short. The scrubs wrinkled the way fabric gets when it's been worn past the point it was meant to be worn. "She doesn't want to go," he said. "I know. I'm sorry. She's never done this before." Linda exhaled through her nose, somewhere between mortified and desperate. "Naya, please. Come here." Naya burrowed closer. Jae-won made a decision that surprised even himself. "Finish your shift," he said. Linda blinked. "Excuse me? Your shift. Finish it. I'll watch her until you're done." The silence that followed was a different kind of silence entirely. "Chairman Shin," Linda said slowly, like she was choosing each word very carefully. "You run this hospital. I'm aware of that. You can't just… I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm offering." She stared at him like he had said something in a language she didn't fully speak yet. "This isn't appropriate. She's my daughter. I should be the one." "How many patients are on your unit right now?" he asked. Her jaw tightened. 11. "And the pediatric unit is already understaffed." A pause. "Yes." "Then go," he said simply. "What time does your shift end?" She looked at him for a long moment. He could see her turning it over, looking for the catch, checking for the angle. There wasn't one. He didn't have the energy for angles tonight. 7, she said at last. "I'll be here." She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again, and then something in her face changed. Not relief exactly, but something adjacent to it, something quieter and more complicated. Like a person who hasn't been helped in so long they've almost forgotten what it feels like. "Thank you," she said softly. Then she turned and left, glancing back once at the door. Jae-won looked down at Naya, who was already growing heavy with impending sleep. "Just you and me," he said quietly. She yawned, patted his chest once with her open palm, and closed her eyes. He sat at his desk with a sleeping baby in his arms for the next 3 hours. He heated the bottle Linda had shoved into his hand on her way out. He figured out, through trial and error, how to burp a 1-year-old without waking her up. He ignored 4 calls from his secretary. He did not open the financial projections. He watched Naya sleep instead and felt, for the first time in 3 years, that the silence in the room was not the same as being alone. His secretary Gu Hannah appeared at the door at 9 and stopped dead. "Is that a baby?" "Yes." "Why do you?" She crawled in. She stayed. Hannah walked closer, her expression cycling through surprise and softness, and something that looked almost like hope. "She's beautiful." "Yes." "Whose is she?" "Pediatric nurse. Linda Osei." Hannah's brows came together. "She's the one covering doubles every week?" Jae-won looked up. "She's been pulling double shifts since Dr. Cho left, and they lost 2 nurses last month. They're chronically short." Hannah paused. "No one told you?" He set his jaw. "Get me a full staffing report on pediatrics." First thing tomorrow. He paused. And Hannah, find out everything you can about Linda Osei. Quietly. She doesn't need to know. His secretary studied him for a moment. That long professional gaze she used when she had opinions she was too well trained to say out loud. Then she nodded. Done. After she left, Jae-won looked down at Naya again. Her small chest rose and fell in the easy rhythm of someone who had decided, with complete confidence, that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. He envied her that certainty. Linda appeared at 7:04, still in her scrubs, hair fully loose from the bun now, slightly out of breath. She stopped when she saw the scene. Him at his desk, her daughter asleep against his shoulder, an empty bottle on the side table. You fed her, she said. She was hungry. You knew how to. I figured it out, he said. It wasn't complicated. Something moved across her face. She opened her mouth, closed it, and looked away quickly. He watched her blink several times in rapid succession. Are you all right? He asked. I'm fine. She crossed the room and held out her arms, and this time Naya went to her without protest, sleepy and pliant. Linda held her close and pressed her lips to the top of her daughter's head and stayed there a moment longer than necessary. Thank you, she said, not looking at him. For watching her. For the bottle. For all of it. When did you last eat? He asked. She blinked at the shift. I had lunch. When? Around noon, I think. It's 7. You've been on your feet for how long? She hesitated. 14 hours. And your next shift? 6 tomorrow morning. He looked at her, at the exhaustion pressed into every part of her, the way she was holding herself upright through sheer will, and before he could think better of it, he said, Have dinner with me. The air in the room changed. Chairman Shin. There's a restaurant 2 minutes from here. Open all night. You haven't eaten. Neither have I. That's not. I can't. Why not? She met his eyes, and for just a second the careful distance she'd been holding cracked, and he saw something real underneath, something warm and frightened and very much alive. Because you are the chairman of this hospital, she said quietly. And I am a nurse who just let her baby tear apart your private office. That's not a reason. It's enough of one. He held her gaze. Is it really? She looked away first. I should go. She shifted Naya against her shoulder and turned toward the door. Then stopped without turning back. Good night, Chairman Shin. Good night, Linda. She left. He stood in the middle of his empty office, in the hush that followed, and realized his chest was doing something he hadn't felt in 3 years. He was looking forward to tomorrow. The report Hannah placed on his desk the next morning was thorough. Linda Osei, 28 years old, born in Atlanta, Georgia, came to Busan 4 years ago on a nursing placement program. Outstanding record at both previous hospitals. Never late, never absent, never complained. Picked up every additional shift offered. He turned to the second page. Father of the child, Marcus Webb, American national. Businessman. Current whereabouts, unknown. The birth certificate had been filed without a father present. He turned to the third page and felt the cold settle into his stomach. An eviction notice. Dated 11 days ago. A final notice dated 4 days ago. She was days away from losing her home. He stared at the page for a long time. Then he picked up his phone. If you think you know how this story ends, you don't. Because Shin Jae-won was about to do something that would change everything, and it had nothing to do with money. He didn't tell her. He handled it quietly, the way he handled everything, through layers and intermediaries, a shell account that couldn't be traced back to him. Her back rent, paid. 3 months advance, settled. The eviction, cancelled. He also called the head of pediatrics and told him he expected a staffing solution on his desk by end of week. 2 new hires, effective immediately. The overtime rotation, restructured. And he rearranged his own schedule to include rounds on the pediatric floor, something he hadn't done in 8 months. He told himself it was operational oversight. He told himself it had nothing to do with a particular nurse with gold-flecked eyes and a tired, stubborn, luminous face. He was a very unconvincing liar. He walked onto the pediatric floor on Thursday afternoon, and she was at the nursing station, head down over her charts, pen moving. She looked up as he approached, and he watched the sequence of her reactions, recognition, surprise, something warmer that she shut down before it fully arrived, and then the professional composure that settled over her face like armor. "Chairman Shin," she said evenly. "Nurse Osei." The other nurses had stopped pretending to work. "Is there something I can help you with?" she asked. "I'm doing rounds. Assessing unit performance." "I see." A pause. "Where's Naya today?" "Home. I found a more reliable sitter." She tilted her head slightly. "How did you know the last one canceled?" "I know most things that happen in this hospital," he said, which was true, but also not quite what he meant. The silence between them had a texture to it. "I should get back to charting," she said. "Of course." He turned to go, then stopped. "Linda." She went still. "Have dinner with me." The nursing station went absolutely silent. Even the monitors seemed to hold their breath. "Sir," she said very quietly. "We're at work. I'm aware." "This is not appropriate." "Probably not," he agreed. "Have dinner with me anyway." She gripped the edge of the counter. "I can't." He moved closer, lowering his voice, so only she could hear him. "I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since Tuesday night." "Don't say that." "Why not?" "Because it isn't fair." Her voice dropped to almost nothing. "Because I have a daughter and a complicated life, and I cannot afford to let someone like you." She stopped. "Someone like me," he repeated carefully. "What does that mean?" She looked up at him, and there it was again. The real thing, underneath everything else, unguarded just for a second. "It means I know how this ends," she said. "I've seen it. I've lived a version of it. The powerful man, the woman who doesn't fit the picture his world expects, and eventually the world wins. My world doesn't win unless I let it." "You say that now." "I mean it now." She shook her head slowly. "I saw her picture. In the memorial corridor downstairs. Your wife. She was beautiful, Chairman Shin." He held very still. "She was. I'm not a replacement for her." "You are not remotely close to a replacement for her," he said, and the quiet intensity in his voice made her blink. "You are the first person who has made me feel like I'm still alive. That is not the same thing." Her breath caught. From down the hall, a colleague cleared her throat. Loudly. "Chairman Shin, there's a call from the board on line 2. He didn't look away from Linda for another full second. Then he said, "I'll call back," and finally turned. "Sir," the nurse pressed. "They said it's urgent." He walked away. But as he moved down the corridor, he felt Linda's eyes on his back the whole way, and that was enough. That was more than enough. He left the hospital at 6:30 with her address in his coat pocket, and a plan that he told himself was purely practical. He would make sure the building was safe. He would confirm that the eviction situation had been properly handled. He would not stay long. He was not doing this for any other reason. The building was worse than he had imagined. He had grown up in Busan's wealthier districts and had spent the last 20 years in boardrooms and executive suites and the kind of spaces that made you forget the city's harder geography existed. Standing in front of Linda's building now, he remembered. Peeling paint along the exterior walls. A broken light above the main entrance. The stairwell smelled like mold and damp concrete, and something older, something that had been there so long it had just become part of the air. He climbed to the 3rd floor. He heard the voices before he turned the corner. "I don't care about your situation." A man's voice, flat, impatient, with the particular cruelty of someone who had done this before. "I've already rented the unit. You're out by tomorrow morning. Please." Linda's voice. He recognized the cadence of it immediately, that same controlled steadiness she used at work, but thinner now, pulled tight. "I have the money. I can pay half tonight and the rest by Friday. I just got my check." "Not my problem. You've been behind for months. I've been patient. I'm done being patient. Where am I supposed to go? I have a child." "Not my problem either." Jae-won came around the corner. Linda was standing in her doorway, still in her work clothes, Naya balanced on one hip. She was trying to stay calm and failing at it in small, invisible ways that he suspected she thought nobody could see. Boxes were stacked in the hallway behind her, her things already pulled out, already made irrelevant. The landlord was a heavy man in his 50s with the look of someone who had long since stopped needing to explain himself to anyone. Both of them turned at Jae-won's arrival. "Who are you?" the landlord said. "Her employer," Jae-won said. "What does she owe?" The landlord squinted. Then he named a number, with the tone of someone confident it would end the conversation. Jae-won opened his banking app. "No," Linda said sharply. Jae-won, chairman, don't. He transferred the amount, then transferred 3 additional months' advance without breaking stride. "Check your account," he told the landlord. The man looked at his phone. His expression did something complicated. "You won't contact her about this unit again," Jae-won said. "Not this month, not next month, not for the foreseeable future. If I hear otherwise, we'll have a different kind of conversation." The landlord looked between them, pocketed his phone, and left without another word. The hallway went quiet. Naya, who had been watching everything with wide, serious eyes, reached for Jae-won and made a small, insistent sound. Linda didn't move. She was staring at him with an expression he couldn't fully read, something between gratitude and fury, and something rawer than either. "You had no right," she said. "You were being evicted." "I was handling it." "You were packed," he said quietly, nodding toward the boxes. "That's not handling it. That's surviving it." Something flickered across her face. "Don't," she said. "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Make it sound like you understand. Make it sound like you know what my life is." Her voice stayed level, but he heard the tremor underneath it. "You don't know anything about me. You don't know that Naya's father told me he loved me and then disappeared the week I told him I was pregnant. You don't know that his family hired a lawyer to warn me off. You don't know that my own parents told me I was on my own the second I decided to keep her." She exhaled. "You don't know what it's like to build a life with nothing and watch it almost fall apart every single month anyway. So please don't stand in my hallway and act like you've saved me. You've only made it more complicated."
He absorbed that.
Every word of it. "You're right," he said. "I don't know, but I want to." She looked away. "This building isn't safe," he said. "The stairwell railing on the second floor is loose. There's mold in the walls. The window locks on this floor don't work. I checked on my way up." "I know," she said quietly. "Then let me move you somewhere safe while you find something better." Her chin lifted. "I'm not your charity case. I'm not offering charity." "Then what are you offering?" He was quiet for a moment, choosing the words carefully because she deserved careful words and not the easy version of this. "When I held Naya in my office," he said, "something came back to life in me that I'd spent 3 years making sure stayed dead. And when you walked in after her, looking for her, it didn't stop." He paused. "My wife and I tried for years to have a child. We never did. She died before we could. And I buried that along with everything else because it hurt less to be numb than to want something I couldn't have." Linda's eyes were glistening. She hadn't looked away. "I know you're scared," he said. "I know you've been hurt by someone who had more than you and used it to make you feel small. I know I probably look like a version of that from where you're standing." He took a breath. "But I am asking you to give me the chance to be different. Not out of pity, not out of guilt. Because you matter. Because Naya matters. And I haven't felt that about anything in a very long time." The silence was long and weighted. Naya, still on her mother's hip, reached for him again. "Pa," she said softly. They both went completely still. Linda looked at her daughter, then at Jae-won. Her face crumbled at the edges. "She's been saying that all week," Linda said, her voice barely audible. "I didn't know who she meant. She doesn't, she's never had." "I know," he said. "We need to correct it." "I know," he said again. But neither of them moved to do it. Naya patted her mother's cheek with one hand and held the other out toward Jae-won, fingers spread wide, patient and certain. Linda closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, something had shifted. "A hotel," she said. "Just until I find a proper place." "All right. Not your house. Not anywhere connected to you." He didn't say anything. "Jae-won. There's a guest residence on my property," he said. "Separate entrance, full kitchen, completely private. It's empty. It's safe." She stared at him. You said your daughter deserves better than the life you had, he said quietly. I'm offering better. Just take it. Another long silence. Then, this changes nothing between us. Of course, he said. She gave him a look that said she knew perfectly well he was lying. But she let him carry the boxes. She told herself it was temporary. She told herself she would be out of his guest house within the month. She told herself the clean kitchen and the real locks on the windows and the sound of Naya sleeping without the noise of thin walls all around them were simply practical necessities and not the kind of thing that could make her feel things she had firmly decided not to feel. She was a very unconvincing liar, too. The guest house was smaller than the main residence. Modest, he had called it, which told her something about the size of the main house. But to Linda it felt like stepping into a different country. Floor-to-ceiling windows that let the evening light in from all sides. A kitchen with an actual oven, not just a hot plate. A bathtub Naya treated like a private swimming pool from the first night. Jae-won kept his distance. Mostly. He was there in the evenings sometimes. Not intrusively, he didn't hover or push, but he was around, in the way that felt less like surveillance and more like quiet company. He had dinner ready on the nights, she came home from a long shift and she protested every time, and he ignored her every time, and eventually she stopped protesting. He read to Naya at night. Korean picture books, slowly, so she could hear the rhythm of the words. Naya understood none of it and loved every word. Linda would sit on the other end of the couch and pretend to look at her phone while she watched his face in the low light, the careful way he held her daughter, the slight softening around his eyes when Naya reached up to touch his jaw. She thought about what it must cost him, wanting this. She thought about the photo in the memorial corridor downstairs at work, his wife, young and lovely, frozen at 31. Tell me about growing up in Atlanta, he said one evening, when Naya was asleep and the house was quiet. She glanced at him sideways. There's not much to tell. I disagree. She was quiet for a moment. Then, because she was tired and because the room was warm and because he had never once used what she told him against her, she talked. About her mother's house and how it had stopped feeling safe. About the group home at 16. About the nursing program she'd applied to 3 times before she got in, working nights at a diner in between. About landing the placement in Busan and getting on the plane with 2 suitcases and a feeling that was half terror and half the most enormous relief she had ever felt. You built everything yourself, he said when she finished. I didn't have another option. A lot of people with no other option still don't do what you did. She looked at him. Don't make it romantic. It was just survival. Survival is not just anything, he said, and he said it with such quiet conviction that she had to look away. 3 days later, he kissed her. They were on the couch. She'd been telling him about a little boy on her ward who'd been discharged that afternoon, 6 years old, in for a scary week, and he'd walked out holding his mother's hand and stopped at the door to wave at Linda specifically, like she was someone worth remembering. She was smiling about it, her hands moving as she talked, and she looked up mid-sentence and found him watching her. You're staring, she said. I know. Stop it. No. She felt the warmth climbing her face. Jae-won. You're beautiful when you talk about your patients, he said simply. You should know that. I told you to stop. I know. He shifted closer on the couch. Not quickly. He never moved quickly with her. She'd noticed that. He was always deliberate, always giving her time to choose. Tell me to leave. She didn't. Linda. Don't, she whispered. But she wasn't moving away. Don't what? Don't make me want this. Too late, he said softly. We're already past that. She looked at him. Really looked, past the chairman and the wealth and the careful wall she'd been keeping up, and she saw the same thing she'd seen the night he sat on the floor of his office holding her daughter, like she was precious. She closed the distance. The kiss was slow, and then it wasn't, and she felt 3 years of his grief and 3 years of her own loneliness meeting somewhere in the middle and recognizing each other. When they broke apart, they were both very still, breathing carefully. This terrifies me, she said. Me too. I'm serious, Jae-won. I cannot do this halfway. I can't afford, emotionally, to do this halfway and have it fall apart. I'm not asking for halfway, he said. She looked at him for a long time. Then she kissed him again, softer this time, and when Naya's voice drifted in from the bedroom, a sleepy, contented paw, they broke apart and looked at each other and started laughing, quietly, in the kind of surprised, helpless way that happens when something you thought was impossible turns out to be real. But there was a war coming, and neither of them was ready for who would start it. Jae-won's mother arrived at the hospital on a Wednesday morning with no appointment and the face of someone who had already decided how the conversation would end. Her name was Shin Jae-won, and she had run the administrative side of Hansung Medical Center for the better part of 2 decades before officially stepping back, which meant she had stepped back in name only, and everyone in the building knew it. She was a small woman with excellent posture and the particular kind of authority that didn't require volume. She came into his office without knocking. "Tell me it isn't true," she said in Korean. He set down his pen. "Tell me which part you're asking about." "The nurse." She said it with the careful neutrality of someone who had something sharper ready if she needed it. "The American. With the child. Her name is Linda Osei. She works in pediatrics. She is excellent at her job. She is living in your guest house. She needed safe housing. I have housing available." The math wasn't complicated. His mother clasped her hands in front of her. "Jae-won, do you understand what people are saying?" "I don't particularly care what people are saying." "You should." She moved to the chair across from his desk and sat, which meant she was settling in. Yujin's family still contributes to this hospital. Her parents attended the last donor gala. They are grieving people who have respected your silence and your distance for 3 years. What you are doing is living my life. Making a spectacle. I'm not doing this publicly. I'm not performing anything. I'm simply. You moved a woman and her illegitimate child into your home. The word hit the room like something physical. "Don't," he said. "I'm telling you how it looks. I don't care how it looks. I care how it is. And what it is that Naya is a 1-year-old child who has done nothing to anyone and does not deserve to be called that in my presence or anywhere else." He kept his voice level, but he was aware of his hands pressing flat against the desk. "And Linda is a woman of exceptional character who has worked harder than most people in this building to be here. I will not hear either of them spoken about that way." His mother looked at him for a long moment. "You're in love with her." He didn't answer. "Jae-won, you have known this woman for a matter of weeks." "I know. You cannot know someone in weeks. I know what I feel." She stood. The warmth had left her face entirely now, and what replaced it was the look he remembered from his childhood. Not cruelty exactly, but the absolute certainty of someone who believed they were protecting something important. "I will be speaking to the board." He looked up. "About what?" "About the appropriateness of a relationship between the hospital chairman and a subordinate employee. About perception and liability and the standard of conduct this institution is expected to maintain." She paused at the door. "I am giving you the opportunity to end this quietly, before it becomes something that cannot be undone. And if I don't..." She turned and looked at him with something that might have been sadness if it weren't so resolved. "Then I will have her contract reviewed. I will find a reason. There are always reasons, if you look carefully enough." "You would do that," he said quietly. "I am doing what I have always done. Protecting this family." "You're threatening a woman whose only offense is that I care about her." "I'm protecting you from a mistake. You're protecting an idea of who you want me to be." He stood. His voice was still quiet, but the quiet had a different quality now. "I understand that you loved Yujin. I understand that her memory matters to you. It matters to me too. But she is gone. And I spent 3 years being a ghost in her honor, and calling it grief, and calling it loyalty. I was not healing. I was disappearing." He held his mother's gaze. "I am not disappearing anymore." She left. He sat back down and touched his cheek, which was still faintly warm from where her hand had connected with it 2 seconds before she walked out the door. A sudden, impulsive blow she had never landed on him in his adult life, and which told him more about how frightened she was than anything she had said. He picked up his phone and called Hannah. "Move my afternoon. I'm going home early." Linda was in the kitchen when he got there, Naya in the high chair demolishing a bowl of soft rice. She took one look at his face and set down the spoon. What happened? My mother knows. Knows what? He looked at her steadily. She closed her eyes for just a second. How bad? She's going to bring it to the board. Jae-won. I handled it. How did you handle it? He didn't answer right away, which was its own kind of answer. What did you do? She said, and her voice was careful in the way it got when she was managing something large. I told her I wasn't ending it. The silence in the kitchen was very full. She threatened my job, Linda said. It wasn't a question. Yes. She turned away from him, resting both hands on the counter. Her shoulders rose and fell with a slow breath. I told you, she said quietly. I told you the first night that I knew how this story went. You told me this story was over before it started. You were wrong then, and you're wrong now. She's on the board of this hospital. She can end my career here. She can make it difficult at every other hospital in this city. Only if I let her, and I'm not going to let her. She turned around. And how are you going to stop her? This is her world, Jae-won. This hospital, these board members, these donor families. She built these relationships for 30 years. You think you can go to war with all of that for me? For someone you've known for 6 weeks? Yes, he said. She stared at him. I know that sounds reckless, he said. I know it sounds like something a person says before they understand the cost. But I have sat across that boardroom table for 3 years, not caring whether I won or lost any of it. I have managed and maintained and preserved, and I have felt nothing the entire time. He crossed to her. You made me feel something. Naya made me feel something. And I am not trading that away to keep a seat at a table I don't even want to sit at. She was blinking rapidly again, the thing she did when she was trying not to cry and doing an imperfect job of it. You have a daughter, she said. I have a child to raise. I cannot let her see me depend on someone and then have it fall apart. I cannot be the woman who let a powerful man turn her world upside down and then walk away when it got too hard. I have been that woman before, Jae-won, and I will not be her again. I know about Marcus Webb, he said. She went very still. I know about what he did, what his family did. He kept his voice careful, not filling it with too much, just enough. I know you've been betrayed by someone who should have stayed. I know you have every reason in the world to look at me and see the same risk. And I cannot promise you perfect certainty, because nobody can. But I can promise you that I am still here. I am telling my mother no. I am choosing you and Naya, not because I'm trying to save you, but because you are the best thing that has walked into my life in 3 years, and I will not be afraid of that. She stood very still for a long moment. Then she crossed the space between them, took his face in her hands, tilted her head back and kissed him. Different from the other times, steadier, like a decision being made. Naya banged her spoon on the tray of her high chair and made a loud, triumphant sound. They broke apart laughing. Fine, Linda said against his cheek.
Fine.
But if your mother fires me, you are explaining it to Naya when she's old enough to understand.
Deal, he said.
Neither of them knew that the board meeting was going to force a choice neither of them saw coming. And that Shin Jae-won was about to do something that would shock every single person who thought they knew him. The emergency board session was scheduled for Friday. Hannah told him about it on Thursday morning with her professional face fully in place, and just enough tension around her eyes to tell him she knew what it meant. Your mother called it? 3 board members co-signed. The agenda is listed as Executive Conduct and Institutional Standards. Hannah paused. There's a secondary item. Review of a subordinate employee contract. He said nothing. Sir, Hannah said carefully. What do you want me to do? Nothing, he said. I'll handle it. That evening he told Linda. She was very calm about it, which was its own kind of alarm signal, the calm she deployed when she was managing something that would otherwise undo her. Let them review the contract, she said. Let them find whatever they're looking for. I've been doing my job at 110% for 18 months. They won't find anything. That's not the point, and you know it. Then, what's the point? The point is they're going to make it uncomfortable enough that you leave. That's the goal. Not firing you, just making it impossible to stay. He looked at her. I won't let that happen. You can't control a board meeting. No, he agreed. But I can control what I say in one. She watched him. What does that mean? He smiled at her, small and very certain, and kissed her forehead once. Get some sleep. She didn't sleep particularly well. Neither did he. Friday morning came in gray and quiet. Jae-won dressed slowly, made Naya's morning bottle, and sat with her for half an hour while Linda got ready for her shift. Naya sat in his lap pulling at the buttons of his shirt with great concentration, and he let her, watching the morning light move across the room. "Pa," she said, patting his chest. "Yes," he said. "I'm here." Linda appeared in the doorway in her scrubs, hair pinned back, watching them with an expression she quickly rearranged when she noticed him looking. "Don't burn everything down," she said. "I'll consider it, Jae-won." He stood, transferred Naya to her arms, and cupped Linda's face briefly with one hand. "Trust me." "I do," she said, quietly surprised by her own answer. "That's what terrifies me." He arrived at the boardroom at 9 sharp. 12 members. His mother at the head. Several faces he'd known for decades. Several faces already set to a certain careful neutrality that told him they were waiting to see which way the wind moved before they committed. "Chairman Shin," his mother said formally. "Thank you for joining us." He did not sit down. "I'll make this brief," he said. "I understand the agenda. I understand the concern. I'd like to address it directly, rather than let us all sit here and be careful with language for 2 hours. He looked around the table. "Yes, I am in a relationship with a nurse employed at this hospital. No, there's been no abuse of power, no impropriety in our professional interactions, and no negative impact on the function of this unit. I have documentation of all of this if anyone would like to review it." The room was quiet. "What I'd like to say in addition," he continued, "is that I have run this hospital for 6 years. I took the chairman position 2 years after my wife died, at a point when I was in no condition to lead anything because this institution needed stability, and I was the person available to provide it. I have done that. I have done it well. And I have done it at the cost of every personal thing that makes a human life worth living." He paused. "I am no longer willing to do that." His mother's expression did not change, but he saw something move behind her eyes. "If the board determines that my relationship with Linda Osei constitutes a conflict of interest requiring action, I have a proposal that resolves the conflict entirely." He let that land. "I will step down as chairman effective the end of this quarter. I will assist in a full transition to qualified leadership. I will have no further executive authority over any employee of this hospital, including the person in question." The eruption was immediate. 6 people talking at once. His mother's voice cutting through. "You cannot be serious." "I have never been more serious in my life. This hospital is your father's legacy." "My father's legacy was healing people," he said, "not preserving my misery for the sake of appearances." The room did not calm down for a long time. There was argument, there was disbelief, there was the particular kind of institutional panic that happens when someone refuses to behave the way the institution expects. Jae-won stood at the head of the room and waited. Eventually, the noise settled. "The contract review," his mother said, quieter now. "Nurse Osei." "If a single item of professional misconduct can be demonstrated," he said, "I will accept whatever action the board determines is appropriate. I ask only that the review be legitimate and not motivated by personal vendetta." A silence. One of the older board members, Dr. M., who had served since his father's time, cleared his throat. "The staffing improvements in pediatrics," he said carefully. "Those were your directive?" "Yes. The unit outcomes have improved significantly in the last 4 weeks. That's because the unit is properly staffed now." Dr. M looked at his mother, then back at Jae-won. "I'd like to table the contract review pending a proper performance assessment," he said. "By the book. No shortcuts in either direction." 2 other members nodded. His mother looked at Jae-won for a long moment. "You would really step down," she said. "I already would have if it wasn't for the transition period. The hospital needs continuity." "Once that's secured," he nodded once. "Yes." She looked at him, and something changed in her face. It wasn't agreement. It wasn't warmth, exactly. But it was something adjacent to the recognition that she was looking at a person she hadn't given enough credit to. The meeting concluded without resolution on the executive question, which was its own kind of resolution. The contract review was tabled. The immediate threat was diffused. Jae-won walked out of the boardroom and called Linda. She answered on the second ring. What happened? It's done. Not finished, but done for now. Are you all right? He stood in the corridor, looking out the window at the city spreading out below. More than I've been in a very long time. A pause. Then her voice soft. Come home. He was already walking toward the elevator. The months that followed were the strangest and most honest of his life. He didn't step down immediately. The transition took time, and he was meticulous about it, because whatever else had shifted, he still believed in the hospital's mission, and he wasn't going to leave it in chaos. But he worked with purpose now instead of inertia, and the difference was something the staff noticed even if they didn't say it out loud. He smiled more. He took lunch. He occasionally showed up at the pediatric unit not to conduct assessments, but simply to be there. His mother did not come around easily or quickly, but she came around. It started small. She called the house one evening, not his cell, the house number, and when Linda answered, there was a long pause on both sides before Shin Jae-won asked, carefully, whether Naya had started eating solid foods yet. Linda, equally carefully, said yes. They talked for 4 minutes. Neither of them mentioned the board meeting or what had been said in the hallway that night, and when she hung up, she stood in the kitchen for a moment in silence before Jae-won appeared and raised an eyebrow. Your mother called, she said. I know. She texted me that she was going to. Linda looked at him. You orchestrated that. I suggested it was possible. She shook her head slowly, but she was almost smiling. The formal meeting came 6 weeks later, tea at Boksoon's house, which Linda approached with the composure of someone walking into a professional assessment and the very slight tension around her jaw that told him she was more nervous than she was showing. Naya sat between them on the sofa and was, as she always was, completely unaware that she was supposed to be intimidated by anything. Boksoon watched her granddaughter reach for her reading glasses from the side table with the same expression she'd worn looking at Jae-won that day in the boardroom, the one where she was recalculating.
She's quick, she said.
She's destructive, Linda said, retrieving the glasses. She once pulled the antenna off the TV. Something shifted almost imperceptibly in Boksoon's face. Not a smile, not quite, but the precursor to one. It wasn't easy after that, but it was possible. And possible, Jae-won had learned, was enough to work with. Linda found an apartment in the 4th month, a real one, a good one, 2 bedrooms and a reasonable commute, in a building with a doorman and a park half a block away. She told him about it over dinner with the particular combination of pride and slight apology in her voice that came out when she was asserting her independence and felt she needed to justify it.
He didn't argue.
He helped her move in and then drove back to the estate and sat in the suddenly very quiet guest house and felt the absence of her like a change in air pressure. She called him at 11 that night. Naya won't sleep in the new room. Is she all right? She's fine. She keeps saying your name. A pause. He was quiet for a moment. My name? She's been saying it for 2 weeks.
Pawn.
It's the closest she can manage. He sat with that for a moment, something large moving through his chest. Do you want me to come? He asked. A longer pause. Yes, she said quietly. I think we do. He was there in 20 minutes. Naya settled within 10, curled against him on the narrow bed while he read to her in Korean until she went still and then went truly, deeply asleep. He sat there for a while after, in the dark of a room that was just beginning to become familiar, and thought about what it meant to be needed by people who did not need to need you, who had survived without you and chose you anyway. Linda was in the kitchen when he came out, 2 cups of tea on the table, her feet tucked under her on the chair in the way she did when she was finally relaxed enough to stop performing composure.
Thank you, she said.
You don't have to thank me for that. I know. She looked at him. I know I pushed back. About all of it. About the help, the house, the board, your mother, all of it. You had good reasons. I still have good reasons, she said. I'm just choosing differently than my reasons suggest. He sat down. Meaning? She picked up her tea and held it in both hands, looking at him over the rim. I love you, she said, like she was reporting something factual rather than confessing it. I've been in love with you for about 2 months and trying very hard not to let it matter. It matters. So. She set the mug down. There it is. He looked at her for a long moment. I love you too, he said, equally straightforward. I've been in love with you longer than 2 months. Possibly since the night you told me I didn't know anything about your life and then proceeded to prove it. He paused. You were right, by the way. I didn't know. I know more now. She exhaled. We're really doing this. We've been doing this for months. I mean, saying it out loud. Officially. Yes, he said. We're officially doing this. From the bedroom, Naya made a small sleepy sound and then went quiet again. They sat in the kitchen for another hour, talking about nothing particularly important, her patients, his transition planning, a restaurant Hannah had recommended, a book Linda was reading. Easy conversation, the kind that doesn't need to prove anything, the kind that means someone has become home. He left at 2 in the morning and she walked him to the door and kissed him in the hallway in the quiet of the building, and he drove home thinking about the particular way joy felt when it was unexpected, how it arrived not with fanfare but with the small, stubborn persistence of something that refuses to stay buried. 3 years before, he had walked into that hospital every day and felt nothing. He had run meetings and signed documents and made decisions, and none of it had touched him because he had made himself untouchable. He had thought, in the way you think things when you are very good at lying to yourself, that this was discipline, that it was strength, that the absence of feeling was the same thing as control. He knew better now. He knew it because of a baby who had crawled into his locked office and handed him a fistful of rug threads like a gift. He knew it because of the woman who came looking for her, who fought him at every turn not out of stubbornness, but out of the hard-won understanding that the people who say they'll stay are the ones you have to watch most carefully. She had watched him. She had let him prove himself. And she had loved him anyway, with the particular courage of someone who knows exactly what it costs. 6 months after the board meeting, on a warm evening in late spring, they stood together in the courtyard of a community center in Nampo-dong where Naya's playgroup had organized a small recital. Naya was on a low stage in a yellow dress, her hair in 2 neat puffs, performing a dance routine that bore only a conceptual resemblance to what had been choreographed, with complete and total confidence. The MC called the parents forward for photos. Linda looked at him. This is where we're officially a family, she said. In front of everyone. Yes. Are you ready? No, he said. Let's go. They walked to the stage together. He heard the whispers. He saw the looks, curious, calculating, some warm, some not. He held Linda's hand and felt her squeeze it once, quickly, and then they reached the stage and Naya lunged for him from her teacher's arms and said, "Pawan," with absolute authority, and the whole courtyard heard it. The camera flashed. A family. Asymmetrical, improbable, stitched together from grief and stubbornness, and a 1-year-old who had crawled through a biometric-locked door by means that were never fully explained. Walking back through the crowd, Linda leaned close to him. I need to tell you something. What is it? She looked up at him with an expression he had learned to read, the combination of terrified and incandescent that appeared on her face when something was more than she had room to contain. I'm pregnant, she said. I found out this week. 8 weeks. He stopped walking. The courtyard kept moving around them. Parents collecting children, music, the warm noise of a crowd. He stood completely still and looked at her, and felt something move through him that had no name in any language he knew. Say something, she said. He pulled her into his arms, right there in the middle of the courtyard, and she laughed against his shoulder, surprised and shaking and real, and he held her like he was also holding the 3 years he had spent emptied out, and the person he had been before that, and the version of himself he had almost believed was the only version left. Naya, still in his other arm, patted them both on the head with great satisfaction. He had come into this year a ghost. He was leaving it as the kind of man he had forgotten it was possible to be, the kind who has something to protect, someone to choose, a reason to be present in his own life. It had started with a baby who smiled at him on the floor of his private office. It would continue for the rest of his life. If you stayed all the way to the end, thank you. Genuinely. This is exactly the kind of story Lanterns and Love was built for. The love that doesn't fit neatly into anyone's expectations, the kind that takes courage to choose and even more to keep. If this one moved you, hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss what we put out next. We're here every single week with stories just like this one. And before you go, drop a comment and tell us where in the world you're watching from right now. Is it raining where you are or warm? Are you in bed, on a commute, sneaking a break at work? We love knowing our lanterns and love family is out there, spread across every corner of the globe, all of us connected by the same stories.